Welcome everyone to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are continuing our deep dive into the Bermuda Triangle. I hope you're all doing well today. We have a good show. And I hope you remember to leave a like before you head out. It always helps the channel. So I believe we have 2 chapters left. So next week we'll be finishing this first book by Gian J. Quasar. And then we will continue with his follow-up that was published in 2017. So right now this is a book from 2004. Hey Lerny, good to see you here. Alright. So chapter 10 is what we are reading today. Interest from a Past World is the title. Last week we were talking about different surfaces of other planets or celestial bodies, stonework from past civilizations, and we're going to continue looking into the UFO aspect. So again, I'm just going to say this briefly. This channel does have membership access. If you want to support the work that I do here, please consider becoming a member. YouTube has just updated ways that people can join the channel as a member. If you use an iPhone or iOS, apparently it's much easier to join and become a member and super chat. So I didn't know it was an issue before, but now we have it all squared away. That was nothing on my part, that is YouTube. So I know Brenda was having a little trouble, so try it again, Brenda, see if it'll work for you this time. But we're going to continue today with chapter 10. We got UFO photographs, drawings of photographs. And that's what we're covering today. More UFOs. A few episodes back on this show, we had been looking at the anomalies over the ocean where just fog would appear. And there's time distortion, there's space distortion, just meaning from one location to another. And the mystery continues to grow. Hey Jason, good to see you here. Yeah, we are gonna get rolling very shortly. I do anticipate doing another show on the Great Lakes Triangle, and that's a members only show. Eventually that will become public for everybody. It is an incentive for people to help support what I do here. But we are continuing forward. We have this series planned through January, and there's not a lack of literature to go over. In fact, I could see all of next year having this series continue, because there's just so much information. If you're looking for a quick soundbite, you're gonna get the shell of research in reels and things you see on TikTok. 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, that's not enough time to cover what we're doing here. And that's why we're doing it in this format. So, if you've watched all the way through to now, or even if this is your first time watching this series, I hope you get something out of it and it inspires you to look further on your own free time. But this topic's become very important to me because really there's no lack of information. There's so much. I can't even begin to say. But we're staying around here for the foreseeable future. I have been switching the times that I go live just because I have to make priority for the other work that I'm doing outside of this channel. So it's been consistent the past several months, but we have to switch it up a little bit here this week and next week. Not this weekend, but next weekend I will be out of town, so I will not be able to live stream with the normal shows, especially on the 14th. We won't be having Coral Castle, but we should be back on the 16th, so I don't think we'll have any stoppage of this show week to week for this month. But let's begin. Hey Brenda, good to see you. I'm glad you're all congregating here. That's good. So chapter 10, Interest from a Past World. More than one investigator of the Bermuda Triangle has offered that the pattern of UFO sightings increasing dramatically since the atomic age indicates an expressed concern by the UFO entities for our welfare, possibly, or for their own. This last point of view presupposes that there has been a long-standing interest in the Earth that must imply a connection to it, or requires extensive bases on the planet along with a dependence on its ecology. There's no question that over the last 4,000 years, people have looked up and at one point or another expressed astonishment at, as the Romans put it, naves in aere iusi sunt, or, quote, ships in the sky are seen, end quote. Although many times the ships, quote unquote, took the form of a speeding light, torch, or spear, even a hovering orb of light. For 216 BC, the annalist Julius Obsquenus, and that's spelled Obsquenus, Sequens, he recorded, quote, at Arpinium, which is Rimini in Italy, a thing like a round shield was seen in the sky, end quote. Not a bad simile with our own, quote, flying saucers, end quote. In 98 AD, quote, at sunset, a burning shield passed over the sky of Rome, end quote. Encounters like these were rare compared to today. But the theory that there must be bases somewhere on the Earth combine some undeniable and intriguing facts about the pattern of UFO reports over history. The rarity of ancient reports may represent periodic checkups on what could be viewed as harmless and distant civilizations. But the flurry of sightings since 1947, in a period of stupefying technological progress, may indicate that we can no longer be viewed as harmless, and so UFOs are busily accessing our civilization's exponential progress. But as we know from the Bruce Cathy research, atomic bombs can only detonate on the grid. So if you're outside of those lines, it's like a dud firecracker. They need to be aligned, and it needs to be at a certain time of the year. Otherwise, they don't detonate. So the whole atomic threat is empty. And that should infuriate a lot of people. But that's the way world politics go. And because of that, truth is suppressed. Free energy is banned. And one day, I want to see us regain our power with free energy. But let's carry on. Ivan Sanderson points out that we are no longer distant either. Civilization until the last 500 years was clustered in the Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, and a few other places, giving UFO occupants a greater range of free, relatively uninhabited space to operate in, unobserved on Earth. Instead of viewing the increased number of sightings as new visits to the Earth, he observes that historically the sightings have increased as mankind has moved on westward. With the consequence, quote, they are not coming to us, but that we have been coming to them, end quote. Over his long study, J. Manson Valentine has uncovered evidence suggesting that, quote, coming westward, end quote, means to bases in the triangle. Give me one moment here. So this goes to further support the idea that there's the UFOs are submersible. There's bases underwater. Okay? I think that's pretty clear at this point. He has noted that UFOs commonly come and go from the sky to the sea and vice versa with little effort. They zoom under the sea with as much speed as they do in the sky. He speculates that this might explain the phenomenon of, quote, furrows, end quote, etched in the shallow bank bottoms. Like something literally plowed over the banks at such a speed, its wake cleaved a ditch. So just imagine this as plane crashes but underwater, and it moves just as fluently in the water as it does in the air. He has observed many of these, including a straight furrow extending for 18 miles, even over small islets. They can only be seen shortly after whatever it was has passed before the currents obliterate them. Following them once led to clear circular patches of bottom sand devoid of any customary sea bottom growth, precisely where the lines terminated, as if something had slipped below or had submerged. An apparent long-standing interest in the earth, coupled with what appears to be little interest in open contact with us, poses the question: just what is the nature of the UFO occupants' interest, and what predicates their choice of the triangle? Learning in the comments says world politics is so much that should piss people off. Yeah, there's a lot we've been lied about, or there's a lot that's been lied about to us. And it has nothing to do with political parties. The people in charge controlling things that have the money, they'd rather us live in a movie, okay? The real truth would floor people, but you know what? At the same time, I don't think that's a good excuse. Saying that people will riot and go crazy and everything. No. Power is in truth. And the sooner that we realize that we've been lied to, the easier it'll be to accept what the truth really is. And no, we don't have to baby feed people the truth. You're either interested in this topic or you're not. You want to plug back into the Matrix? Feel free. But why would you like to live a life of lies? But most of you that are here, you're along on the journey with me here, looking for the truth. And we've been doing this for the past 6 months. It's not that long of a time frame. The concentrated effort in studying all of this stuff without distractions of outside influences, it's very important that we focus on all of this during these times of doing these shows. And even if you're listening along, it's beneficial to you to absorb this knowledge. So let's continue here. A wide array of ideas has been put forward that hinge on observing our space center at Cape Canaveral, or that the area is itself ideal for trajectory into outer space. In parentheses, it says, the reason we selected Cape Canaveral for our space center. End parentheses. Or as John Spencer, himself a 10-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, proposed, quote, aliens, unquote, used the area of the Bermuda Triangle as a, quote, catching ground, end quote, for, quote, specimens, end quote, from Earth. He noted that both the area's seclusion and its isolated traffic made it easier for the UFOs to get in, interdict travelers, take what specimens they first chanced to find, and then get out without being detected. But none of these authorities can explain the incidents earlier than a mere 55 years ago. And again, this book is from 2004, and it's referring to 1947. A far more sanguine theory for the presence of UFOs could be suggested by the legends of a past Earth, by ancient writings describing a prehistoric civilization as having had such aircraft, and by a sunken civilization from an unknown date in the midst of the Bermuda Triangle. Another one of the most universal traditions in ancient legends is that of long lifespans for past mankind. This is not only contained in Babylonian accounts, but it is also an ancient obsession in Chinese thought, and also matter-of-factly applied to all peoples in Genesis, both before and after the flood. The only difference is that after the flood, they slowly began to lose this natural longevity. And this could also be coupled with the vapor canopy collapsing. The atmosphere was different in the past. There's been extreme temperature changes for hundreds of years. Things would be colder than normal, then hotter than normal. You'd have long stretches where you'd only have that type of weather or temperature. There's catastrophic transformations that the Earth went under. Very fast catastrophic changes. It explains why we find axe handles in the middle of coal deposits. And the carbon-14 dating theory is slowly fading away. It's not reliable. And that's actually something that I've been aware of for the past 8 years. But I'm glad we're looking into it further now. Lerny says, power is perception. That's correct. Change your perception and gain your own power. It's within yourself. It's a lot of mental hurdles that you have to get over. You have to let yourself know that you are worthy of what you desire. If you're seeking knowledge, you can manifest literally anything as long as you concentrate on it. So it's really it's a war of psychology right now. It's like that saying of, you chain an elephant when it's young to a post in the ground. You let it stay there until it's an adult, and then you unchain it. It won't move from that location. Learned behavior. Don't be that elephant that thinks it needs to stay where it's chained up to. Especially when it's not even aware it's been unchained. I think we're put through schooling systems so that we behave like that elephant. They want you to conform. They want you to go along with these bleeding heart narratives of saving the world, where it's not in danger as they say it is. I always say climate change happens 4 times a year. Winter, spring, summer, fall, or autumn. But these catastrophic changes, it's not a gradual thing. It just happens. We get blasts from the sun. We get radiation blasts. We can't block that out. It's unfeasible to think that we have any significant control over Earth changes. We are literally drops in a bucket in this center of the universe. Because I do believe we're at a central point. Why are so many entities interacting with us on this plane? What makes us so special? It's because we're the seed of God. Lerny says lots of trauma healing is exactly what you're talking about. Yes. And Lerny also says the hype is what feeds the system. It sure does. That's why you need to no-sell a lot of the panic. You need to control your emotions and give thoughtful responses to things. Don't feed into the narratives. Alright. Let's carry on reading, because I gotta get this done within 2 hours. Accidental discoveries in the last 40 years are shedding remarkable light on how we can understand this, and also why we should have expected it if these accounts detail facts. And these accidental discoveries occurred within the Bermuda Triangle because it is ideal for one thing: pressure and isolation tests on the many accessible undersea banks it so ubiquitously offers. The Aquanaut program of the 1960s was cannibalized to prepare astronauts for the isolation they would undergo on the moon shot, and even, according to the hopes of the time, during the prolonged living in small bases on the moon and other planets. Again, I don't think we can get past the Van Allen radiation belt. It just doesn't make any logical sense at this point in time. Prospective astronauts were placed in watertight domiciles, usually some form of submersible, affixed to the bank's bottom, to simulate a completely closed-off mode of living. Shallow banks were ideal for submerging these base stations at depths endurable by man and still making them accessible to terrestrial contact should an emergency occur. The emergency came in the form of a severe and deep cut to one aquanaut's hand. After it was bandaged, his fellow aquanauts sharing that particular domicile determined that he should be brought up the next day. However, the next morning, before preparing him for transfer, his hand was unbound in order to replace the old bandage with a clean one. It was then noted that his hand had healed miraculously, far beyond any exception. Studies eventually yielded the answer. The pressure at those depths had increased helium within the domicile and body chemistry. The profound effect helium has on the healing process was later confirmed and employed in hospitals in the form of hyperbaric chambers, and in parentheses, or Greek hyperbaramos, increased pressure, to treat severely burned patients in critical need of healing in order to survive. What the Aquanaut program has done by accident was to possibly duplicate an environment that might have existed on Earth several thousand years ago before the flood, or before a flood. It has been noted by a number of catastrophist geophysicists that if there were sufficient mass to the antediluvian water vapor canopy, and that's important here. In fact, I gotta take a note of that. See, there's a lot of words here that aren't used every day, but we're including it in our vocabularies now. And I know the YouTube channel Archaics, they're all about the water vapor canopy. He does a lot of research into that. And, you know, it's kind of fun to imitate his voice and all that. I like doing voices of other people, but I respect his research, so I'm not gonna imitate him today. So, okay, I'll restart this sentence. It has been noted by a number of catastrophist geologists that if there were sufficient mass to the antediluvian water vapor canopy, it could have increased gravity at sea level to perhaps as much as twice what it is today. This in turn would have increased helium by perhaps as much as 3 to 4 times. Mankind, in essence, would have been living continually in an environment that today we struggle to obtain in specially designed chambers to speed healing. So that would also explain how there's the hundreds of years of a lifespan for any individual going back really far. Also, a water vapor canopy would have acted as a second ozone layer, giving greater protection to the Earth from harmful ultraviolet light and other solar contaminants that tax our immune systems today, and no doubt allow nasty diseases to get a foothold by simply making the human body divert too much energy to fend off the constant geophysical attacks. The end result is that we degenerate, quote, age faster. Another factor touched on in Chapter 8 might be the timing of biorhythms based on the Schumann frequency. And today, October 3rd, 2025, the Schumann frequency is off the charts. So if you're feeling high energy or extreme lethargy, if you're feeling really sluggish, not wanting to do anything, that's the reason why right now. So in parentheses here, it says fundamental frequency of the Earth is 7.8 hertz. And some of these frequencies lately have been in the triple digits. So going from 7.8 hertz, I saw we were at like 110 hertz. So it's literally off the charts right now. And there's many different factors going into how that's measured and how it actually happens. like the causes of it. I'm spending a little more time going a little slower over these sections because it's new material to take in. So I'm going to read this one more time. Another factor might be the timing of biorhythms based on the Schumann frequency, and the possibility that such catastrophic changes to the atmosphere could alter that frequency to its present rate, and with it, alter the human bioprocesses, or quote, tune, end quote, them, to operate and burn out more quickly. Along with this are genetic alterations. Geneticists and biologists have long known that the human genome and biochemistry can be affected by cataclysm. New species emerge after atomic tests, and foliage grows more quickly, for example. They also know the body is essentially designed to eat, drink, reproduce, sleep, and live forever if only the aging process could be blocked and cell division maintained without degeneration. Footprints of biological potentiality, both positive and negative, have proven that manipulation, or rather adjustment, of lifespans is possible. For example, the average lifespan of the pygmy is only 35 years, while the protozoa Globergina never dies. It divides and becomes two separate entities ad infinitum. Perhaps the most astounding success so far in the field of, quote, quantum longevity, end quote, involves the study conducted in 1985 by Daniel Rudman, that's spelled Rudman, of the University of Wisconsin. So I'm taking note of this name as well. And you know, eventually, we'll be going off script, we'll be moving away from the books every now and then to look into specific things on this series. And I don't know when we'll get around to it, but eventually we will. It's once I combine all the notes and do further off-screen research, we'll get that going as well. So Daniel Rudman, in 1985, from the University of Wisconsin, he is the first physician in history to literally retrogress the age of a human being by injecting synthetic human growth hormone, or HGH, in 12 men ages 61 to 80, 3 times a week for 6 months. He was able to turn them back in time 20 years. Gray hair returned to its previous color. Wrinkles on hands and face disappeared. Skin thickness increased by 7%. Fat was reduced by 14%. And lean muscle mass increased by 8%. 60-year-old men literally looked 40 again. Liver, spleen, and bone density were returning to their youthful states. It was not surprising that the human body handled the high doses of injected hormone, since they were doses it once produced itself. Studies have proven that at age 20, the human biochemistry is signaling 500 micrograms of HGH to be released per day. This, however, decreases by age 80 to a mere 25 grams. So it goes from 500 or 25 micrograms. So it moves from 500 micrograms in your 20s, from 500 to 25 by the time you're 80. If you're not taking supplements and all of this other stuff. And this is knowledge from 1985. So this has been known for the past 40 years. The reasons have never been determined. For future tests have proven that the pituitary, the master gland, is capable of releasing as much HGH when old as when young, but seems to lack the stimulation. In other words, it lacks the correct bio-friendly environment to maintain its stimulation. Induced blood poisoning like the bends. Oh, man. I could talk a lot about the bends. In parentheses, it says nitrogen poisoning of the blood. End parentheses. So, the bends also happens. There was an account of it over by the Chicago River and downtown Chicago when they were just starting to build skyscrapers, and they had to dig down to the bedrock because most of the Chicagoland area is swampland. When they made these holes and dug down to the bedrock to put the supporting beams in for these skyscrapers, the workers experienced the bends, and that resulted in bleeding out of every orifice in the face. You'd have bleeding ears, bleeding eyes, bleeding nose, bleeding mouth. I would never wish that on anyone. But I think that has something to do with going into the high pressure underground area. It just, it's too much for our current day biochemistry. So, induced blood poisoning, like the bends, demonstrates the myriad chemical changes that occur in the body just by changing pressure too quickly. So really, you need to ease into that pressure. If you go too fast, that's when you start having the bleeding problem. But the effects of increased pressure, as experienced in undersea domiciles, on the stimulation and reception of HGH have not been studied yet. And again, this is in 2004. Principally because the effects of HGH were not fully appreciated until the Rudman study was published in 1990. And also because uniformitarianism cannot accept that the geo-environment has never been any different than today. Yeah, see, these uniformitarianists, they don't want to venture away from their concepts because it would collapse everything that they believe to be true. They're not open for interpretation. They just want to tell you how things are, and then that's it. It's a dead-end road for them. Jason H says, "Whoa, didn't know that." I assume you're talking about the bends. Yeah, it's a wild thing that happens, and I only learned about that from researching architecture and the history of Chicago and everything. It was almost like mentioned in passing with a lot of the study I was doing on that. Kind of like these books, they have little nuggets of information that just pop and stand out, so I go and I take note of it so that I remember it later on. But there was a while there where I'd forgotten what the term was, the bends. It was on the tip of my tongue and I couldn't say it. So the repetition of writing things down, it helps keep the memory alive for me. In the biblical account of the post-flood ages, one thing is immediately apparent. Noah's son, Shem, lives remarkably shorter than his father, dying at 600 years instead of his father's 950 years. Generationally, after him, the ages noticeably decrease. This, however, is exponentially along the lines of a truly physical equation. But myth does not abide by the rules of physics. The decrease in longevity is recorded as follows. Shem lived 600 years. I can't pronounce this name. I'm sorry. I'm going to butcher this. Arphaxad. Arphaxad, 535 years. Canaan, 460 years. Shelah, 460 years also. Eber, 404 years. Peleg, 339 years. Regal, 339 years as well. Seruch, Seruch, 330 years. That's 9 less. Nachor, Nachor, 304 years. Tara, Tarra, 205 years. Abraham, 175 years. The exponentiality is seen in that the greatest increase is right away, then continues at a slower pace. This might be explained by the initial change in the atmosphere from a water vapor canopy loss. In other words, the human body was deprived of its accustomed pressure, perhaps subjected to different wavelengths, and was adjusting to the new environment at the cost of its longevity. One can well imagine that even a moron living to the ripe old age of 900 would be a genius by our standards today. An entire civilization of very healthy people living for 1,000 years might indeed have been capable of astounding feats, not least of which would be space exploration and amazing city building, the latter of which man seems to have excelled in the Genesis records. Loss of knowledge over several generations would not pose a problem, since literally dozens of generations could be alive at once. While the lifespans of post-Diluvian men, those of the time period to which the great mega-civilization of Indian Vedas, biblical Babel, and even perhaps Bimini belong, would have been much less. They still are recorded as living long ages as compared to us, such as 300 or 400 years. With our ages continuing to dwindle until the present 80-year average, it is not surprising that man lost knowledge and that succeeding cultures remembered the era of a remote past of long ages and great accomplishments as the time of the, quote, gods, end quote. I need to take a drink of water. Short break. Short break from reading. I'm staying here. And it's good we're still in the first hour. Lerny says, some mysteries may be able to bypass conventional physics. Oh yeah, how are you able to explain something that you're basing your math on wrong? It's like Brenda's channel, Beyond the Box. We have a box that we're given. We're told this is physics, this is the way things are, and then we see all these anomalies happening in the Bermuda Triangle, which defies it defies physics, the known physics that we have today, or what's written down in books and all that. Alright, let's continue here. What if UFOs represent a sampling of a prehistoric Earth culture returning to this planet? Considering the lower atmospheric pressure and the greater infiltration of solar forces and ultraviolet light on mankind after the loss of a water vapor canopy, the present atmosphere would not be conducive to their presumably longer and healthier lifespans. Out of necessity, they would have to seek bases that more closely match Earth's earlier atmosphere. Again, presumably the natural atmosphere of a healthy planet with an intact vapor canopy, to which they might also have migrated. This would require existence under the oceans, but only at depths that could recreate the delicate balance of oxygen, helium, and other vital homeostatic elements belonging to an earlier Earth. In the entire world, the ideal areas for this purpose are the continental and island shelves of the Bermuda Triangle, which occupy advantageous depths. They might also seek the ruins of a vanished civilization, hoping to determine just what went wrong. Spencer has also offered an alternative for the disappearances of planes and ships that may be more worth considering above. My apologies here. Spencer has also offered an alternative for the disappearances of planes and ships that may be more worth considering in the above light. He felt that the UFO occupants might be assessing our technological development to see how far we are progressing, and therefore how much in danger we might be of affecting our own destruction, as mankind may have done before, tragically altering the Earth's natural ecology and atmosphere in the process. If UFOs carry a sampling of former Earthmen who took to the stars long ago, this might be regarded as a conservationist and preventive measure. I'll read that again. If UFOs carry a sampling of former Earthmen who took to the stars long ago, this might be regarded as a conservationist and preventive measure. This would, of course, presuppose an ultimately altruistic purpose to their actions, one that seems belied by the destruction of so many ships and planes, if UFOs are to blame. If the repeated sightings of UFOs are genuine, no one can explain their continued presence as mere disinterested interlopers. They make no attempt at contact, leave no trace or residue, despite claims, and do not openly wage war. All this is tantamount to indifference, yet they continue to be seen in the Earth's atmosphere, though they have developed an avoidance of crowded areas. Essentially, what it approximates to is an interest in the Earth, but no desire to expose themselves to our atmosphere or culture. No one interested in faithfully discussing missing planes and ships can avoid references to UFOs or, quote, flying saucers, end quote. Many do not like to do so because of the erratic behavior the subject often excites today. Discussion of UFOs may elicit giggles from some, scorn from others, derision, dismissal, awe, and even dangerous devotion. One can be accused of religious or cult associations, or, contrariwise, be labeled apostate. But no one can deny that since 1947, some phenomenon has developed in the skies above us that deserves study, or at least serious comment. Thousands of reports from both civilization and military pilots have detailed a host of unexplained aerial phenomena. They are often described as a, quote, disc, end quote. Flying saucer, quote unquote, cigar, quote unquote, or just a very brilliant light or glow. They have often paced, harried, and dogged aircraft, or they simply streak past at phenomenal speeds. Some show signs of intelligent control, while others do impossible things. They make 90-degree turns at high speed. They hover, ascend, descend, and disappear, all indications of unknown propulsion and mind-boggling power. Radar observations have been particularly useful. The UFOs have been clocked at tremendous speeds by several stations monitoring the same subject. They can appear in a single turn of the radar antenna and disappear just as quickly. They clock in as doing 3,000, 4,000, and 10,000 miles per hour. The figures are tabulated by many stations, making it conclusive that they are, quote, good returns, end quote. So, like, they're good readings. These are observations made by multiple stations and cross-referenced. That is, solid objects and not temperature inversions. A meteorological phenomenon of cooler, heavier layers of air trapped in higher altitudes between warmer layers. At first, between 1947 to 1950, they showed special interest in our large cities, then our vegetation belts and military installations. From New York came reports over Rome, Paris, and London, off Sicily and circling Buenos Aires. They descended on Washington, D.C., and streaked past other world capitals, Sydney, Tokyo, Lisbon, and Madrid. 122 sightings in 1947 increased by increments of 30 each succeeding year until they reached a crescendo in 1952 with 1,501 reports of lights, saucers, discs, and cigar-shaped objects flitting about the Earth. UFOs also come in, quote, flaps, end quote, or waves, and then leave, as in 1952, then again in 1966, then in 1973, and again in 1990 over Europe and Russia. So we have a stone, or it's a solid tablet. I don't know if it's stone. We have a tablet here to look at. I'm going to show it briefly, then I'm going to read the caption, and then I will show it again. This tablet shows pictographs, an even earlier form of writing than Sumerian cuneiform. Pictographs are hardly primitive. They are the basis behind most languages, but over time they changed to a cursive, easier to write, form, an evolution readily apparent in Chinese even today. However, the mysterious scripts of the Indus Valley and Easter Island seem to have advanced beyond pictographs. Everything in Genesis and Mesopotamian accounts of cataclysm indicates they are truncated from earlier, more detailed versions, thus explaining why some scribes mistranslated a number system and instead of coming up with 930 years for an antediluvian lifespan, came up with 28,000 years in Babylonian. So there's also, Archaics, the YouTube channel, he also talks about how a shar is a day, not a year. So Egyptologists have said that, these people have lived thousands of years, right? Well, if you reduce it from counting a shar as a year to then a day, it makes the lifespan actually more accurate, so it reduces that 28,000 number to a 900 number. And that it correlates well with what we know about other civilizations, and especially biblical accounts. So I'll show the tablet again. Now, I personally don't know what they say. Alright, and we hit an hour mark. Awesome. Alright, we're getting through this. This might be explained by copycat reporting, that is, one actual sighting inspiring a whole host of bogus reports from spontaneous stargazers and erratic minds. But such a well-placed people as Russian generals, the Lord Hill Norton, former Chief of Defense Staff for Great Britain, U.S. governors, former Vice President Al Gore, former USSR President Mikhail Gorbachev, and former President Jimmy Carter have either seen them or actively pursue an interest in them. Disappearances of aircraft have directly resulted when our interceptors got too close to unknown, quote, blips, end quote, or targets on the scope. As in the case of a missing F-59 jet on November 23rd, 1953, when its blip was observed to, quote, merge, end quote, with a, quote, unknown, end quote, violating U.S. airspace over the Great Lakes. So I'm sure we'll be covering that again in the Great Lakes Triangle series. This does not imply any form of predation, but could merely represent accidental destruction or self-defense. However, a disappearance off Australia is poignant for the pilot's inability to identify the craft that was harassing his plane, a disquieting similarity to the disappearance of Jose Maldonado Torres and Jose Pagan in the Bermuda Triangle in 1980. On October 21st, 1978, Fred Valentich was en route from Australia to nearby King Island. What passed before his eyes was recorded by Melbourne Flight Service Unit and included in the summary report issued by the Department of Transportation of Australia. It is so extraordinary, it must follow verbatim. So we're going to read this report verbatim. It's printed right in this on the pages here. This is going to be a doozy. Alright. Relevant events. The pilot obtained a Class 4 instrument rating on the 11th of May, 1978, and he was therefore authorized to operate at night in visual meteorological conditions, or VMC. On the afternoon of the 21st of October, 1978, he attended the Moorabbin briefing office. So that's spelled Moorabbin. Obtained a meteorological briefing and at 17:23 hours or 5:23 p.m. submitted a flight plan for the night VMC flight from Moorabbin to King Island and return. The cruising altitude nominated in the flight plan was below 5,000 feet, with estimated time intervals of 41 minutes to Cape Otway, that's spelled O-T-W-A-Y, and 28 minutes from Cape Otway to King Island. The total fuel endurance was shown as 300 minutes. The pilot made no arrangements for aerodrome lighting to be illuminated for his arrival at King Island. Or aerodrome. The pilot made no arrangements for aerodrome lighting to be illuminated for his arrival at King Island. He advised the briefing officer and the operator's representative that he was uplifting friends at King Island and took 4 life jackets in the aircraft with him. The aircraft was refueled to capacity at 18:10 hours or 6:10 p.m. and departed Moorabbin at 18:19 hours or 6:19 p.m. So he refueled to capacity at 6:10 and departed at 6:19. After departure, the pilot established two-way radio communications with Melbourne Flight Service Unit, or FSU. The pilot reported Cape Otway at 1900 hours, or 7 p.m., and the next transmission received from the aircraft was at 19:06:14 hours, or 7:06 p.m. and 14 seconds. So 6 minutes, 14 seconds passed. The following communications between the aircraft and Melbourne FSU were recorded from this time. In parentheses, note the word or words in parentheses are open to other interpretations. So I'm just going to show you what I'm about to read here. It's going to be a little difficult to read this verbatim. But the log is kind of like, it's like a script. So that's how I'm going to read it. So the time is 7:06 and 14 seconds. This is from VH-DSJ. I'm just trying to get clear of what we're talking about before I begin reading through this. So this is Valentich, and then FSU is the contact point. So the text reads from Valentech. Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. So DSJ. Is there any known traffic below 5,000? And 9 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, no known traffic. 3 seconds later, VH says, Delta Sierra Juliet, I am, seems to be large, seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. FSU replies 20 seconds later, Delta Sierra Juliet, what type of aircraft is it? 4 seconds later, VH says, Delta Sierra Juliet, I cannot confirm it is 4 bright. It seems to me like landing lights. So he's seeing 4 bright lights in the sky. "14 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. And then 28 seconds pass. VH says, Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. The aircraft has just passed over me at least 1,000 feet above. And again, this is in 1978. 11 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. Delta Sierra Juliet. Roger, it is a large aircraft. Confirm. 4 seconds later, VH says, unknown due to its speed it's traveling. Is there any Air Force aircraft in the vicinity? Ten seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, no known aircraft in the vicinity. 21 seconds later, VH says, Melbourne, it's approaching now from due east towards me. 10 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. And then an open microphone for 2 seconds. So dead air. 7 seconds later, VH replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. It seems to me that he's playing some sort of game. He's flying over me 2-3 times at a time at speeds I could not identify. 13 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, Roger. What is your actual level? 6 seconds later, VH replies, my level is 4,500. 4500. 5 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, and confirm you cannot identify the aircraft. Three seconds later, VH says, affirmative. 4 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, Roger, standby. 10 seconds later, VH says, Melbourne Delta Sierra Juliet. It's not an aircraft. It is... And then there's dead air. For 2 seconds. 18 seconds pass. FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. Can you describe the aircraft? So it uses the word ER. I don't know if it's like cut off language, or maybe it's short for airness. But anyways, FSU asks, can you describe the aircraft? "21 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. It's flying past, or as it's flying past, it's a long shape." And then open microphone for 3 seconds. In parentheses says cannot. And parentheses identify more than, and then parentheses again, that it has such speed. And parentheses, then open microphone for 3 seconds. Before me right now, Melbourne. So I'll read that a little easier here. FSU says, as it's flying past, it's a long shape. Cannot identify more than that it has such speed. Before me right now, Melbourne. FSU, 1 minute later exactly, says Delta Sierra Juliet, Roger. And how large would the air object be? 13 seconds later, VH says, Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. It seems like it's stationary. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me. Also, it's got a green light and sort of metallic-like. It's all shiny on the outside. 23 seconds later, FSU responds, Delta Sierra Juliet. 5 seconds later, VH responds, Delta Sierra Juliet. Then open microphone for 5 seconds. It's just vanished. 9 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. VH replies 6 seconds later, Melbourne. Would you know what kind of aircraft I've got? Is it a type of military aircraft? 5 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet. confirm the aircraft just vanished. VH, 6 seconds later, says in all capital letters, "Say again." 3 seconds later, FSU says, "Delta Sierra Juliet, is the aircraft still with you?" 6 seconds later, VH says, "Delta Sierra Juliet, it's NOR." And this is in parentheses. It just says it's AHNOR. 2 words. And then open microphone for 2 seconds. Parentheses, now. End parentheses. Approaching from the southwest. 14 seconds later, FSU replies, "Delta Sierra Juliet." "15 seconds later, VH replies, "Delta Sierra Juliet, the engine is rough idling. I've got it set at 2324. And the thing is," in parentheses, "coughing." End parentheses. So he trailed off and just started coughing. 12 seconds later, FSU replies, "Delta Sierra Juliet, roger. What are your intentions?" 5 seconds later, VH says, "My intentions are to go to King Island, Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again." And 2 seconds, open microphone. "It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft." "13 seconds later, FSU replies, "Delta Sierra Juliet." 6 seconds later, VH replies, "Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne." 17 seconds, open microphone. And then 21 seconds later, FSU replies, Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne." And that's the end of it. This isn't the end of the report, though, so there's a paragraph here. "There is no record of any further transmissions from the aircraft. The weather in Cape Otway area was clear with a trace of stratocumulus cloud at 5,000 to 7,000 feet, scattered cirrus cloud, that's CIRRUS, at 30,000 feet, excellent visibility and light winds. The end of daylight at Cape Otway was at 19:18 or 7:18 p.m. The alert phase of SAR, or search and rescue procedures, was declared at 1912 hours or 7:12 p.m. and at 1933 hours or 7:33 p.m. When the aircraft did not arrive at King Island, the distress phase was declared and search action was commenced. An intensive air, sea, and land search was continued until October 25th, 1978, but no trace of the aircraft was found. So this incident occurred on May 11th, 1978, and they kept looking for him until October 25th. 5 months. 5 months and some change. So, at the end of the report here, it says, opinion as to cause. The reason for the disappearance of the aircraft has not been determined. And that's the end of the... That's the end of that. If we compare the array of inexplicably missing planes and ships in the Bermuda Triangle with such a case as this, or Torres and Pagans, it is liable to give form to a nightmare of possibilities. The worst, naturally, again, comes back to the area of international kidnapping of human and technological specimens for reasons which we cannot or would not like to fathom. Long before any of these incidents, Spencer and several other ufologists proposed that the rarely seen, quote, cigar-shaped, end quote, UFO could actually be a base ship in which several saucers could fit, as well as several specimens of aircraft and boats from Earth. Something that I've witnessed this year in Texas on Susie's Ranch. Valentich's disappearance is noteworthy for his description of one of these long spaceships. The relentlessness with which the, quote, unknown, end quote, bore down on Torres and Pagan also makes this encounter seem more unnerving in light of these long-held opinions. Moreover, after the Phantom II jet's disappearance in 1971, an unexplained oblong shape was seen in the water that quickly disappeared. This shape was estimated to measure 100 by 200 feet, similar to Valentich's UFO and Spencer's, quote, motherships, end quote. A July 1985 mass sighting over Zimbabwe reported a similar large luminous object hovering at 17,000 feet. When two jet interceptors arrived from Bulawayo, the object ascended vertically with incredible speed and disappeared. Air Marshal Azim Daudpota, that's spelled Daudpota, confirmed, quote, "Scores of people saw it. It was no illusion, no deception, no imagination," end quote. On March 21st, 1990, several pilots and radar stations in Russia tracked an enormous disc or flying saucer near Peroslavl-Zalesky, near Moscow. This case was confirmed by General Igor Maltsev, chief of the General Staff of the Soviet Air Defense Forces. So I'm going to spell this location name out. Peroslavl-Zalesskiy. A description of its behavior as given by General Maltsev in April 1990 official statement is advisable. Quote, "According to the evidence of the eyewitnesses, the UFO was a disc with a diameter of 100 to 200 meters. Two pulsating lights were positioned on its sides. When the object flew in a horizontal plane, the line of the lights was parallel to the horizon. During vertical movement, it rotated and was perpendicular to the ground. Moreover, the object rotated on its axis and performed an S-turn in flight, both in the horizontal and the vertical planes." Unreal. That's my comment. We're still in the quoted text here. Next, the UFO hovered above the ground and then flew with a speed exceeding that of a modern-day jet fighter by 2 or 3 times. All of the observers noticed that the flight speed was directly related to the flashing of the side lights. The more often they flashed, the higher the speed. End quote. General Maltsev's impression was that, quote, "the movement of the UFO was not accompanied by sound of any kind and was distinguished by its startling maneuverability. it seemed that the UFO was completely devoid of inertia. In other words, they had somehow come to terms with gravity. At the present time, terrestrial machines hardly have any such capabilities. End quote. Echoing somewhat this impression, Admiral the Lord Hill Norton has stated, quote, "The enormous and very consistent weight of evidence from sightings and even optical and radar measurements make it clear enough to me that the technology of construction and propulsion of these devices is far in advance even that of our space probes, never mind our manned space flights." End quote. He comments that, quote, "Were such technology in actual use anywhere on Earth, it would have surfaced either in war or perhaps more likely in industry." End quote. Noting that a disk is the most common shape, he has offered the opinion that, quote, U stands more for unexplained than unidentified. End quote. In a flap over Belgium in the same year, 1990, Colonel Wilfried de Brouwer, it's spelled Brouwer, said with refreshing though dispassionate candor, quote, "There was a logic to the movements of the UFOs," end quote. When faced with the unusual reports from around the world by persons who have had no interface with each other and yet remarkably describe the same phenomena, such a fact may elicit from the reader a similar opinion as expressed by Mikhail Gorbachev, quote, "The phenomenon of UFOs does exist, and it must be treated seriously." End quote. The disc shape often reported seems more coincidental with the observed abilities of UFOs. Or seems more than coincidental. The disc shape often reported seems more than coincidental with the observed abilities of UFOs. Physicist Alan Holt suggests that a disk would be ideal to generate an electromagnetic pattern that would nullify or disconnect the Earth's gravitational field around it, allowing it to travel in, quote, hyperspace, end quote, and which huge distances can be attained at slow speed. Noting in his NASA published article, Field Resonance Propulsion Concept from 1980, some attributes of UFO sightings, he poses an interesting solution. Quote, "If the speed of light is the true limit of velocity in space-time, then the potential extraterrestrial visitors must utilize a form of transportation which transcends space and time to keep the trip times short. UFOs are often observed to disappear instantaneously. In a subset of these cases, the UFO later reappears at a nearby location, implying a disappearance from and a reappearance into space-time." End quote. For some time now, the theoretical difficulties of travel in space-time have been the greatest objection to the idea that spaceships could be visiting the Earth from other planets. Recently, however, we have been urged to reconsider the limitations of space travel by some surprises involving the velocity of light and objects in deep space. When 3 of our space probes, Pioneer 10 in 1972, Pioneer 11 in 1973, and Ulysses in 1989, left our solar system, The last NASA detected of them was, quote, an incomprehensible acceleration, end quote. An analogy may help to explain this phenomenon. If space can be viewed as an ocean of electromagnetic wavelengths, the heliosphere, the electromagnetic gravitational force of our sun that creates our solar system, can be viewed as a choppy harbor, distorting, bending, and causing a tug-of-war of forces. When the probes entered deep space, just as when a boat enters calm water, they zoomed along on the smooth electromagnetic ocean of billions of wavelengths, speeding uninterrupted between solar systems and galaxies. Part of Einstein's predictions about space and light and electromagnetic wavelength seems proved by this discovery. He postulated that space itself curves around a massive object like a planet, and with this, so will light bend. Yet, the more light bends, the more it slows. The speed of light around here, within both the gravitational field of the Earth and then that of the Sun, travels at a constant of 186,284 miles per second. But outside our solar systems, free of its gravitational pull, it is only logical to assume that light travels at speeds far greater than what it does within this heliosphere, no longer having to contend with our own sun's massive pull. With such increased acceleration comes a shortening in the amount of time it takes to traverse space. With a speeding object, however, there comes an increase in its mass along with this. Theoretically, a curving of space around the object and a resulting slowing of time. We must remember that our own planet travels at just over 66,000 miles per hour. And with its gravity and curving of space, we have detected a definite slowing of time at its surface as compared to its orbital heights. And again, I'm not convinced that we're plummeting through space at that velocity. If anything, there's objects that are passing by us at that speed. Or around us, I should say. Learning says, that's a good quote. U stands for unexplained, not for unidentified. Yes, I agree. I like that. Because we're able to identify it with our eyes, right? It's unexplainable. So that is more fitting. Unexplainable flying object. Because we sure can't explain how it can navigate the wavelengths like it does. Stops on a dime, does a V check mark and flies out, like what I've witnessed. The principle of the increase of mass with speed was also predicted by Einstein and proven in the cyclotron at UCLA when the atom was increased to speeds near that of light, and its mass was detected to increase. A spaceship traveling at the speed of light or greater speeds would have to increase in mass, thus causing a bending of space around it, and with this a slowing of time within the spaceship's airfield. It would be theoretically possible to travel long distances in relatively short time spans, in parentheses, from the perspective of those inside the spaceships, end parentheses. But time would still progress at its normal speed, in parentheses, or at least our acceptable progression, end parentheses, outside of the craft. So time would still progress at its normal speed outside the craft. So it's more like a bubble. So the craft would expand slightly. Almost like the vacuum of time is making it bigger. It like bloats up as it goes to travel faster. Does that make sense? A round trip from here to Sirius, 9 light years away, at light speed, would only require a box lunch for those inside the spaceship. But Earth's time would have progressed 18 years. But if a speed greater than 186,284 miles per second could be attained in intergalactic space, as now seems probable, the time disparity would be shorter, unless with a greater bending of space-time would allow even more. Observed in-flight behavior of UFOs has, interestingly, inspired our own theories on how to eliminate all these worrisome conjectures. The goal is to achieve total, quote, counterbury, end quote, or anti-gravity around a craft. It is within its own gravitational field and capable of barocentric control. Parentheses, control of the gravitational field from within, end parentheses, while also being able to repel the gravitational fields and wavelengths of other bodies, like a bubble with an ant floating inside. It would be the field of anti-gravity that is accelerating, while the craft inside merely moves with the field, thus traveling at fantastic speeds, but without the increase of mass or curving of space and perturbation of time, making it possible for craft to travel frequently in space without encountering dreadful time lapses between their home worlds and ours. Such craft would also be capable of any maneuver, including 90-degree turns at high speed. Check marks. Since the occupants in their own gravitational field inside would be unaware of the G-forces of such movements, just as our Earth's gravitational field makes us unaware of our own planet's incredible acceleration through space. So that's understandable, but I still think there's something missing to what is Earth traveling through? Like, what is this bowl of water, matter, air, whatever you want to say space is? Like, what is Earth traveling through? Like, we just generically call it the universe, but it's a little more than that. And also, it's downscaled more realistically than what we're told. I think we're in a closed system. Like, that I can get on board with. And then these objects creating an anti-gravity field around it while it's traveling fast. That also makes sense to me. Despite the instant official denials that UFOs exist, pose any danger, it is cautioned that if any of our conventional craft were too near to an intense electromagnetic gravitational field, as such a hypothetical craft would generate, the field would cause all electronic gear to go haywire. Coincidental, one might add, with the effects reported in the Triangle and in UFO encounters throughout the world. Paul Laviolette, that's spelled Laviolettte, systems scientist and physicist, as well as having served on NASA's Space Exploration Outreach Project, has proposed that a less intense form of such a field is generated by the B-2 stealth bomber, created in this case by the engines sending positive electrical charges toward the leading edge of the Batwing and negative charges to the traveling part of the Batwing. Physicist Thomas Townsend Brown was the first to discover this method of propulsion and used it on discs, once again finding these the best suited. This created a pull in the direction of the positive charge and a push from the negative charge, causing lift without the need for air to flow over the wing. You could liken this to magnetics. All right. Although highly classified, elements of the B-2 are known, and these tend to indicate that some form of electromagnetic force is in use. For instance, the U.S. Air Force admits the B-2 leaves no vapor trail at high altitudes. The cockpit sits in a Faraday cage, which is used to shield electronics from massive amounts of static electricity. The Batwing shape is ideal to drain off the buildup of static electricity because its jagged design is equivalent to 7 wing tips, in parentheses, from which on a regular aircraft the static lines leach off the accumulated electrical charges, end parentheses. And the skin of the bomber is made of depleted uranium crystals. One can well imagine what a conventional aircraft would encounter if it got too close to the field of a B-2. I'm going to check the comments here. I see Juan has joined us. Welcome, Juan. Lerny says the whole speed and mass correlation is still something I don't really understand. Well, maybe we'll get there together, Lerny, because I'm still not 100% on it either. I'm thinking here, just give me a moment. I would say that the mass of an object that's traveling is irrelevant as far as, like, you have a small aircraft versus a large aircraft. They can both accomplish the same thing of traveling in this manner, where there's the pull from the front and the push from the back just off the atmosphere alone. And once you reach high enough speeds, you create that bubble around where everything seems normal to the pilots and the people inside the aircraft, but outside, a viewer looking at this thing, it would start looking distorted at that point. Or you might not see it at all if it's traveling that fast. Jason H. says, Thomas Townsend Brown has been coming up a lot lately. Very fascinating. Yeah, this is actually first time I think I've heard of him. And I took a note of his name here to look him up later. So I have notes from every part of this series that I do, so I can go back and dig even further into this. When Brown's model discs first flew in 1952, he believed that a full-sized disc with engines capable of generating appropriate electrical charges would be capable of Mach 3 speeds. In order to belie the criticisms that he had merely created a form of electrostatic propulsion, he carried out the tests in a vacuum chamber, detecting once again the unusual non-conventional electrogravitic phenomenon. That's a new word, isn't it? Electrogravitic. I like that word. In describing Brown's discs, his colleague Mason Rose asserted that they, quote, had no moving parts at all. They create a modification of the gravitational field around themselves. They act like a surfboard on a wave. The electrogravitic saucer creates its own hill, which is a local distortion of the gravitational field. Then it takes this hill with it in any chosen direction. End quote. He further commented, quote, the occupants of one of Brown's saucers would feel no stress at all, no matter how sharp the turn or how great the acceleration. This is because the ship, the occupants, and the load are all responding equally to the wave-like distortion of the local gravitational field. End quote. So think of the field outside the craft like its own bubble, and then the craft itself like its own bubble, and then the occupants are like bubbles themselves, because we're also vessels traveling. And from there it's perceivable observations. While Thomas Townsend Brown postulated no theory for how this was done, aside from saying it was neither predicted by relativity nor by theories of electromagnetism, LaViollette's analysis is worthy of some comment. So here's his analysis, an excerpt of it. However, recent advances in theoretical physics provide a rather straightforward explanation of the principle. According to the novel physics of subquantum kinetics, gravity potential can adopt two polarities instead of one. Not only can a gravity field exist in the form of a matter-attracting gravity potential well... Hold on a second. I gotta reread that. According to the novel physics of subquantum kinetics, gravity potential can adopt two polarities instead of one. Not only can a gravity field exist in the form of a matter-attracting gravity potential well, as standard physics teaches, but it can also exist in the form of a matter-repelling gravity potential hill, So it's like a push up. That's my comment. It's a push up. Moreover, it predicts that these gravity polarities should be directly matched with electrical polarity. Positively charged particles such as protons generating gravity wells and negatively charged particles such as electrons generating gravity hills. So the positive charged protons tend to move downward and the negatively charged electrons push upward. Does that make sense? We have a drawing here that's showing this. So I'm going to read the description before I show it here. Or you know what? I'm going to show it now. And then I'll read the description and I'll show it again. Like a surfboard on waves, right? So the positive protons are creating that dip. The negative electrons are creating that. So it's a pull. It's a push and pull. It is literally riding like a surfboard. The wave-like line depicts how the gravitational field would be distorted around one of Brown's, quote, anti-gravity disks, end quote, into a pulling trough and a propelling hill, as predicted by Dr. Paul Laviolette's subquantum kinetics theory. It also portrays the concept that Dr. Mason Rose was conveying, and in parentheses says, based on an illustration in Dr. Laviolette's paper titled The U.S. Anti-Gravity Squadron, and in his book Subquantum Kinetics. That's something we'll have to look into. And this image was reproduced by permission of Dr. Paul Laviolette. So. All right, we just hit the 2-hour mark. We're finishing it up. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages left. All right, now it's crunch time. With this, we are reminded that the very structure of matter, the atom, is mostly space. A mini solar system comprised of a nucleus with protons inside an equal number of electrons orbiting it. The electrons are never pulled into the nucleus, but they are never repelled out of orbit. The harmony, the gravity, and anti-gravity that maintain their perfect orbits are the result of basic electromagnetic forces between them. In his study of the triangle, Valentine came to other opinions on how to connect the electromagnetic anomalies with UFO travel. He was of the opinion that these were the result of a combination of natural forces and induction by UFO activity. This could explain, he proposed, very localized... I wasn't sure what the word was. Very localized or severe magnetic storms. Very localized? Huh? Causing the aberrations in electronic equipment. He said, quote, space engineers may be utilizing the electrical potential of a very special area of the Earth. End quote. Yeah, like the energy grid. Before completely materializing, quote, these interdimensional craft may be quite invisible to us, while their presence in our atmosphere is being felt magnetically. End quote. This idea about UFOs and special areas for magnetism sounds less fanciful now that elements of Project Magnet have been declassified. This Canadian project, carried out under electrical engineer Wilbert B. Smith in the early 1950s, contains some surprisingly pertinent information. Its goal, as outlined by Smith in a memorandum recently discovered by Nick Velasquez at the University of Ottawa Library, was specifically to determine a means, quote, whereby the potential energy of the Earth's magnetic field may be abstracted and used, end quote. On this basis, he continued, Project Magnet built a small unit to test the hypothesis, with this result that, quote, the tests were essentially successful in that sufficient energy was abstracted from the Earth's field to operate a voltmeter, approximately 50 millivolts. So, end quote. So that's free energy right there. However, it is in the purpose of the ensuing field tests that a most intriguing coincidence with these theories regarding the Bermuda Triangle is uncovered. Smith officially wrote, quote, this project is for the purpose of studying magnetic phenomena, particularly those phenomena resulting from unusual boundary conditions in the basic electromagnetic field. There is reason to believe their discovery will open up a new and useful technology, end quote. While it has often been reported before that Project Magnet located unusual areas of magnetism over the Earth, the purpose of the project to specifically find unusual areas to see if energy was more accessible here, or if these anomalous places could point the way to creating conditions and accessing the field's potential at any given location, are only now being discovered. The purpose again is to find a source of limitless power. The current obsession of our own society in its healthy attempt to finally end our dependence on our dwindling supply of fossil fuels. Yeah, that's been proven wrong though. They don't call it an oil well for no reason. It's a well. The oil is produced from the earth itself. There's a nearly unlimited supply. He further elaborated, and here's an excerpt from this. The design is now completed for a unit which should be self-sustaining and in addition provide a small surplus of power. Such a unit, in addition to functioning as a, quote, pilot power plant, end quote, should be large enough to permit the study of the various reaction forces which are expected to develop. We believe that we are on the track of something which may well prove to be the introduction of a new technology. The existence of a different technology is born out of the investigations which are being carried out at the present time in relation to flying saucers. That's the end of the excerpt. This coincidence is extraordinary. In trying to determine how flying saucers can fly and even be here, Project Magnet was led to magnetism as a power source and its unusual areas as a better tap for this energy. In trying to account for disappearances, triangle theorists uncovered unusual magnetic properties, sudden and unexplained electromagnetic power drains, the many UFO and USO reports in the area, and evidence of unusual energy pulses from the seabed. In parentheses, except in the above scenario, they would not be prehistoric Atlantean complexes, but modern ones. Or for those who believe there is a connection, these are revitalized ones or engineered on the same principle. End parentheses. Both groups involved appear very much to have walked up a foggy avenue from opposite directions and suddenly met head-on. Disappearances also increased in frequency at approximately the same time, quote, flying saucer, end quote, reports began. Trying to avoid UFOs as the connecting link between them all is like trying to avoid a scorpion in your underwear. An example of how confidential were aspects of Project Magnet can be seen in how open Smith was in his 1952 memorandum about his own investigation into UFOs. Concerning his, quote, discreet inquiries, end quote, through the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., he discovered, quote, A. So he's listing things here. A. The matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher than even the H-bomb. B. Flying saucers exist. C. Their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Vannevar Bush. Dr. Vannevar Bush. That's spelled Vannevar Bush. I'm sure they're the Bush family, right? And finally, D. The entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. End quote. And here we have an etching. A UFO as seen near Brazil from a photograph taken from Argentine pursuit plane. From an Argentine pursuit plane, late 1954. And then you just tilt this thing at an angle and then it speeds up into oblivion. Just gone. The tremendous significance is of course, that the mere presence of flying saucers, their shape, speed, and the fact that they seem to be here led us to considering electromagnetism and gravity as means of propulsion. Every bit of our research has led us to believe that such propulsion is possible, that disks are the best shape for this propulsion, and that phenomenal speeds and perhaps some very novel conduits of travel are easily attained. A most remarkable achievement if UFOs end up being only hallucinations, as they are frequently officially condemned. Yeah, I don't think they're hallucinations at this point. Brenda, what are you growling about? So Lerny says a push and pull does make sense. The tech is already there, just repressed. I agree, Lerny. Yeah, Brenda, share your thoughts here. Come on. What's on your mind? Oh, I know. It's because of the Bush family being involved with this. I don't blame you, Brenda. The Bush family has done very evil things. Yeah. The whole trend of this becomes even more provocative when considering the theories of magnetic opposition and how the shape of this sphere is a determining factor for where magnetic phenomena will take place along its field lines. This transmitting of force along invisible magnetic field lines to its magnetic opposite, as determined by shape and mass, shows the frustrating relationship of shape, mass, and energy fields. But it also shows that, quote, portals, end quote, for this energy do exist. It is possible that Bruce Gernon actually flew along a field line briefly while in a magnetic vortex caused by charged particles swirling around the line of force, proving perhaps that one day we can project matter along lines of magnetic force. Like a natural bullet train. This method may be the most foolproof for ensuring that no bending of space will be encountered with hyperacceleration, and that we can achieve the speed of light, which yet again we must recall is an electromagnetic wavelength. This movement of energy over the Earth along its lines of force is only the tip of the iceberg. There are magnetic and gravitational waves in the vacuum of space, though to us they seem to be out of place, for there is nothing from which they could have evolved. But if there is such a thing as galactic magnetic opposition, these waves could represent the field lines of the Milky Way. If we learn to project matter along our own magnetic field lines, it seems logical that we could travel in space along the same way. One presumably could travel along these magnetic field lines to their opposite in the Milky Way. If such a magnetic opposite also exists in the galaxy, it seems logical that it could. Our magnetic opposite in the Milky Way could be a lively and inhabited solar system that, though on the opposite side of the galaxy, could be our easiest first step to other planets instead of conventional jet engines to laboriously get us to Mars or elsewhere. A number of UFO researchers have suggested that UFOs may indeed travel along magnetic wavelengths, and that likewise, we too could be an easy first step for men on the opposite side of the galaxy, if they use these magnetic and gravitational wavelengths as highways. In this theory, the Bermuda Triangle might itself be the portal for this galactic magnetic opposition. That's a big claim. And the high number of UFO reports in the area might merely represent UFOs coming not out of space, but out of hyperspace, from the exact magnetic opposite in the galaxy. And we've talked about this on the Coral Castle show with the Bruce Cathy books. That when the atomic bombs are detonated, there's an equal opposite reaction on the other side of the map. And it's a magnetic reaction. Known magnetic faults in the triangle have been the busiest places for UFO activity, especially around the tongue of the ocean in the Bahamas, the Puerto Rico Trench, and other areas of Puerto Rico. The famous 1972 Adjuntas flap in Puerto Rico lasted for months. So this is spelled Adjuntas. So the famous 1972 Adjuntas flap in Puerto Rico lasted for months, beginning near the mountain village of Adjuntas, in parentheses, near the Center for Natural Gamma radioactivity. Oh my gosh. That is a long word. Aeroradioactivity, according to the U.S. Geological Survey map, end parentheses. The radiating down toward the island's radiating downward toward the island's western coastline. During these night flaps of unexplained lights, a number of derelict sailboats were found near Aguadilla and Cabo Rojo and towed to port with no evidence suggesting why they were abandoned. Sounds like abductions to me. Continuing UFO activity is especially prevalent around these areas today. The precise area where Torres and Pagan disappeared after reporting the, quote, weird object, end quote. By the way, the intro to this series has a legit radio transmission where they're saying they see something weird before the transmission cuts out. I'm not sure if that's the exact one that I used in the intro, but it's very similar to it, if it's not. During one encounter on April 11th, 1992, several witnesses, including Federico Cruz, director of Civil Air Defense at La Paz, Puerto Rico, saw a huge disc being pursued by a military jet. According to Cruz, quote, the saucer was metallic, silvery, and highly polished, and it seemed to be playing with jet. It would continually stop in the air suddenly. Then, just as the jet was about to catch up, it would move away quickly." End quote. Concerning the concentrations of coastal sightings at Laguna Cartagena, he firmly stated, quote, "We have seen brightly colored ovoid We have seen brightly colored ovoid and round objects as they overfly the area, making right-angled turns, and sometimes they enter the lagoon and disappear underwater." End quote. Thereby recalling to mind yet again the idea that they prefer bases beneath the sea's pressure. Quote, "The UFOs are there. They really are. So that's why I can't remain silent while others ridicule those who have seen these things." End quote. Others have braved ridicule by placing in an affidavit, a clear statement about things that official investigators are perhaps hesitant to include in their narrative reports. After his son's disappearance in 1980, Jose Pagan Jimenez did not defer to the nebulous wording of the official report and dubbed the, quote, object, end quote, merely, quote, weird, end quote. But he specifically called it a, quote, glowing object, end quote. A discovery he made during his own investigation as a police lieutenant. For 15 years he tried to find his son, even traveling to the Dominican Republic in hopes that he and Torres had returned but were being detained. He finally gave up in 1995 and refuses to talk about it to this day. The only link left to an explanation for the family is that, quote, weird object, end quote. One can understand why there would be an amalgam of theories about the Bermuda Triangle, but it is amazing how so many intertwine. All these attributes of UFOs seem strangely to recall Edgar Cayce's readings, given long before modern UFOs' realization of craft that flew in the air and underwater using gravitational and magnetic wavelengths in a previous Earth civilization before a cataclysm. Modern propulsion theories suggest that such craft are possible. Past cataclysms may explain why beings from other worlds would prefer to be based beneath the sea, and the ideal geography of the Bermuda Triangle, its magnetic faults, its past dead civilization, and its convenient banks may tell us why and how they are there. Now, we don't know for sure if these past civilizations are dead. They're even saying here that some of these beings that lived for a long time, possibly our ancestors, just traveled to another time and space. And that they're visiting here almost like they don't want to bother us in what we're doing now during the quickening, or whatever you want to call it. In this context, it may not be appreciated but advisable to re-emphasize that aircraft disappearances involving UFOs only seem to happen over water, and the Triangle, because of its heavy volume of traffic, is the one place where it is easiest to interdict travel, since a disappearance is naturally dismissed as an accident, whereas over land, if no trace is found, an acceptable excuse can never be offered. Incidents like Valentech's and Torres's disappearances may become known only because they happened close enough to land for the pilots to contact a base and warn others about what was happening. The others may have been silently taken. But there may be another reason altogether for such sightings and disappearances. A final piece in the puzzle, befittingly final, as the ocean is itself the final frontier on this planet, an integral part of its function and the element that makes this planet hospitable. It is best that we gaze not to the stars for this answer, but to a world that is just as old and even more perplexing. And that's the end of chapter 10. I do believe we are getting somewhere here. Okay, so there's 2 more chapters left. Yeah, that's my bad. I thought this was going to be the first to last for this book, but we got 2 more weeks of covering this book. So next week we'll be reading chapter 11, Let the Oceans Speak. Okay, it's not going to focus. Not important that it focuses right now. But this next chapter, it's just as long almost. 18 pages. And then finally, the last chapter, 12 pages. But we got a lot of new information today. Daniel Rudman, Paula Violette, Thomas Townsend Brown. We learned about Project Magnet. Dr. Vannevar Bush. Electrogravitic is a word that came up today. As well as aeroradioactivity. And one other person that came up was J. Manson Valentine. So that's it for today. What are your thoughts? I think it's more concrete now that we are dealing with something that's living underwater, traveling underwater. And think of it, it's undetected. It's 2/3 of this realm that we're inhabiting. Not counting the air that we breathe in the sky. We're talking about land mass versus ocean mass. Of course they can go undetected. We don't have anything underwater. We don't have any public cities underwater. It's not a thing. It's just, if we do have them, which I think we do, it's not talked about. Lerny says it's interesting. Yes. The whole reason why we are here doing this series. Okay. I gotta get going. Thank you for being here earlier today. I might do the same thing next week depending on how things go. And it's just so that I can get other work done before the sunset. my other work involves going door to door, collecting signatures. So that's a whole thing in itself. We'll save that for another day. We'll probably talk about it on the Sunday show. Hey, Scott. Good to see you here. Scott says UFO bases may be underwater. Yeah, I think that's pretty solid now that after we read that chapter. But this will be it for today. Thank you all for being here. Make sure to drop a like on the video. And keep an eye out for the re-uploads. We'll be doing some backlog from 2 or 3 weeks ago. The one show where my computer just shut off in the middle of the live, I was able to continue the live stream, so there's some blackouts in there I gotta clean up in the editing software before I go and repost it. So that's been the hang up. I couldn't get a copy of the live stream until just a few days ago. My YouTube downloader program wouldn't download the live until I had done a reboot on the PC. So yeah, it's definitely a chapter we can all take time to reflect on here, what we've covered today, because it's making things clearer, but as always it brings up new questions. But I think we're at a better understanding of what we're dealing with. Hey, Bounty Hunting Bear. Good to see you're here too. Yeah, so keep an eye out for the Sunday show. We should be doing it this week. And always something new with that. So until the next one, class dismissed.